Oh hey, it's Emily, and I have a moment to sit down and talk about the books I've read in the month of March. So future videos like this might actually be recent reads where I just talk about a certain number of books that I've read most recently, and that way I can keep it at a specific number of books and keep these videos shorter. But I haven't filmed one yet, and I need to just talk about the books that I've read in the month of March. So we'll just make this a March wrap up. And I do have one reading vlog for this month, so I will link that down below. As I mentioned in my TBR, I'm going to be switching things up a little bit, and so I just have the one. But here's everything that I have read outside of, I've also been doing a Lord of the Rings binge. I'm in the middle of that. I'm actually on Return of the King. So I'm not going to talk about any of the Lord of the Rings videos. I'm making a separate vlog about that, and we'll briefly mention it in whatever my next recent reads video is. So this is everything I've read in March except The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. Cool. Okay. So the first thing I finished in the month of March was How to Avoid a Climate Disaster by Bill Gates. This is his recent nonfiction book about climate change. I ended up really enjoying this. I thought it was super informative and interesting. He's obviously coming from a very specific perspective. He's also very privileged, and of course acknowledges this off the bat. I think he did a pretty decent job acknowledging his privilege, acknowledging his limitations, but explaining exactly where, and being upfront about where he's investing his money, why he's investing his money that way, and the fact that he's coming from a very particular perspective, specifically related to innovation and technology, but also explains why he really feels like he needs to speak up, and also explains how he's used that privilege to talk to as many people as he possibly can about climate change. So I thought it was super interesting. He essentially lays it out in, here's some key ways that emissions happen, moving things around, making food, building things, etc. He kind of breaks it down that way and goes in descending order in terms of the quantity or percent of emissions that come from that specific sector, and talks about the technological breakthroughs that have happened so far and what still needs to happen in order to get to zero emissions. And that's the goal, is just get to zero emissions. I think he emphasizes that technology and innovation are going to play a key role. We're going to mess up. There are going to be some technologies that fail, but ultimately the stakes are too high, and what we have so far isn't going to work in all of the places that we need it to work. And so we still need a lot of breakthroughs. There's a lot that we have that we can work with, and he also goes through those numbers, but there's more that we need, and he kind of focuses in on where he feels like we can truly make a few key investments and hopefully get some of the breakthroughs in key areas. I really like how he broke it down and how he thought about it, and I thought it was overall an interesting, well-researched, well-articulated argument. I don't think this would be the first book I would hand someone about climate change, but if you're familiar and kind of into the literature and understand the science of climate change and just want to get his perspective of where do we go from here, I think it's well worth a read. The next thing I read was Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. I absolutely adored every second of this. I listened to the audiobook, which I would highly recommend. The narrator was great. I didn't like the way he did female voices necessarily, but overall he was a super fun narrator. And this one follows Luke and Oliver, and Luke is kind of the main perspective that we're following here, and he has a work situation happen. He's kind of a mess. He has a work situation happen where he needs to essentially be seen with kind of a put together and upstanding boyfriend in order to be redeemed in the eyes of the people that his clients and the people that he works with, or that his organization works with. And he also has some family issues going on. We also have Oliver, and Luke and Oliver have actually met before and didn't leave with a positive impression after that meeting. But when he asks his friends for advice, they say that he should have a fake relationship with Oliver. Oliver also has some reasons why he might want a fake relationship, and so they strike up a deal to have a fake relationship until those certain elements in their life are kind of more together, and then they can end it. but of course they fall for each other along the way. They're very different people. I really appreciated that. I mean, I love the humor in this, first of all. Actually, the humor is fantastic. I, in general, love the tropes that were used here. I really feel like if you enjoyed Red, White, and Royal Blue, and enjoyed the humor and the tropes and just the overall vibe of that book, I really feel like you could like this one. I got very similar just vibes and feeling from this one. And I really appreciated that, you know, the author didn't try to make the characters perfect. They are very, very flawed characters, but I feel like they were really, really good, or became really, really good at communicating with each other, and they learned how to communicate with each other and work with each other throughout this process. And I really appreciated that learning curve and seeing them go through that together. This was just precious. It was so precious. I absolutely adore this. There's a trigger warning for cancer in a parent, so if that's something that you don't in general want to read about at all, then just beware of that. But I love this one. The next book that I read, or that I finished, was, well, the next one I finished was The Hobbit, but I'll talk about that later. The next one was Lore by Alexandra Bracken. And this one, unfortunately, wasn't a hit for me, and it's unfortunate because this is the beautiful Fairy Loot edition, and I'm not going to want to keep books that I'm not going to want to reread, and so it's unfortunate, but it happens. And this one is a modern-day Greek imagining, and essentially there's an event every 7 years that lasts for 7 days, and some of the gods become mortal, and it's kind of a free-for-all of different groups and houses hunting and killing certain people in other houses, and so you're either hunting or being hunted, and there's just a whole lot going on in the 7-day period. And if certain people are able to kill someone with power, then sometimes they can take over that power in a sense. Anyway, there's a lot going on. You follow Lore, whose family was involved in this, but they were killed. She kind of has stepped back and essentially tried to hide since the last event that has happened, and it's coming up on the next one. And Athena one day shows up on her doorstep bloody and kind of draws her back into the fray, promising that she can get revenge on the person that killed Lore's parents. Stuff ensues. Anyway, this was pretty slow for good chunks of it, and that really wasn't what I wanted out of this book. I wanted fast-paced, fun action. The characters seemed kind of two-dimensional to me. Their motivations seemed very strange, or they would change on a whim in certain situations, and sometimes it just didn't make sense. And ultimately, I just didn't vibe with it. It took me a while to finish because I wasn't super compelled to pick it up, and at the time I really just wanted something super compelling that I could just be drawn into, and unfortunately that didn't happen with this. So I did finish it, but it wasn't a favorite. The next book I finished was Fellowship of the Ring. That will be in the Lord of the Rings vlog, as I mentioned. The next book I finished was The Connector's Advantage by Michelle Tillis Letterman. This is a pretty brief nonfiction about being a connector and what that means, some strategies that you can employ to be more of a connector, some reasons why that can be important, and again, some strategies for how anyone can learn some of these tools and learn some of these strategies, even if you potentially are introverted or even shy and don't really feel like you ever can be a connector. She really emphasizes that there are plenty of different kinds of people who can employ these strategies and have some success, and you want to keep the reasons in mind why you want to be a connector, and set some specific goals to work towards, and that's going to look different for different people, and that's great. Anyway, I thought it was super interesting. I have a physical copy back in Arlington, so I'm really glad I have a physical copy to kind of go back and just take some of the highlights and take some of the key points and remind myself of those later on. I thought it was interesting, would recommend if that sounds interesting to you. I then read This Golden Flame by Emily Victoria, and this one ended up being pretty fun. I had a good time reading it. This is it's a sci-fi fantasy mix. I want to say the world felt kind of Greek inspired, seems vaguely historical, even though some parts of the civilization have interesting technology. I don't know, it was kind of an interesting mix of historical and futuristic, fantasy and sci-fi. And you follow our main character, Karis. Her parents were killed, and she and her brother were taken to another island. So it takes place mostly on islands. And she and her brother were taken to another island to be part of essentially a scriptorium. So scripts and runes play a key part of the magic in this, which I thought was kind of interesting. And they're taken to a scriptorium, and her brother actually, very quickly after they arrive at the island, is actually taken away and taken to a different island away from his sister because he's kind of causing trouble. And Karis wants to find her brother. She one day comes across, so there are automatons in this world as well, which is why I say there are some sci-fi elements in here as well. The automatons of this world have essentially all been asleep. They're not active. And at one point towards the beginning of the story, she finds a unique kind of automaton, and she actually is able to awaken this automaton. And this automaton is trying to figure out, there's a 200-year gap in this automaton's memory where this automaton is Alex. I'll just say Alex because that's this automaton's name. Alex has been asleep for 200 years, and so Alex is trying to figure out what has happened in that 200 years, why his creator is, what his creator was doing, why his creator is kind of remembered in a horrific light 200 years later, and he's trying to figure out the mystery of his origins and what happened, while Karis is trying to find her brother, and their stories kind of converge, and they need to travel in order to try to figure out where her brother is. They meet some pirates along the way that are navigating the waters in between these islands, and this group of pirates actually becomes super ingrained in this quest as well. It was just fun vibes. I really enjoyed the vibe and the world in here. It's not a very long book, and it's not a series. And so it's pretty short. The character work is not too in-depth, and so I'd like to get to know some of the characters more. The villain is just kind of a cookie cutter general villain, and so I really enjoyed the setup of the world in the beginning. Some parts got a little bit slower towards the middle and into the latter part of the book. Things definitely picked up towards the end, but again, the character work there's not a ton of depth here, but it was an entertaining ride along the way. So it was this Golden Flame by Emily Victoria. The next book I read was The Two Towers, which I'll talk about later. The next book I read was The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. This was a super interesting nonfiction about the power of habit. So it's more of an academic, it's not necessarily a self-help guide. There's not a how-to. There are some lessons to be drawn that he makes at the end, but it's more of an academic piece that talks about a lot of the research in these areas, talks about examples, anecdotes, things like that, about how powerful habits are. It first talks about on an individual level how powerful habits are, how powerful keystone habits are, and how ingrained habits are even. And there are some interesting stories about, even if you can't remember things, it's still interesting to see in people who have had brain damage and can't remember new information, how ingrained some habits are. And again, talks about keystone habits, where if you change one habit, that can affect related habits that really come together and can kind of shift some things. And also talks about habits on an institutional, organizational level. Those were some super interesting stories. And also talks about habits on a societal, social level, and how that has interacted with certain movements over the past decades in particular. And it was super interesting. I would recommend. I thought it was fascinating. So the next book I read was the original. This is a 3-hour audio only novella, or 3.5 hours. It's very short audio novella, and I'll set up the world a little bit. So in this world, it kind of gave me Scythe vibes, where humans can have nanites that basically can heal them. They can live for long periods of time. They can kind of regenerate in a sense, and so a lot of people have these nanites. Some people have kind of gone off grid, essentially. They have no nanites. They're, they don't want to be tracked by the government. They don't want to be their health information to be traced. They just want to live a mortal, normal life. And they can also make replicas of people if they want to. So in this world, or we follow Holly in this world, and Holly is a provisional replica. So she's a replica of her original Holly self, and she's created and essentially created to live 4 days. And she is given the task of finding her original self and killing her original self because the original Holly has murdered her husband. And so the provisional replica, Holly, is very confused. She doesn't know if she can trust the government organization that created her and that is essentially keeping her alive for 4 days. And the benefit, if she is successful in her task, is that she will be able to live beyond that 4 days. But if she's not successful, then her life will end after 4 days. She doesn't know if she can trust the government. She doesn't know if the motivations behind her original self murdering her husband. She's very confused about why she would do that. There's an organization of people who have gone off-grid who are intertwined in this story as well. And so she doesn't know if she can trust that organization. So she's really just trying to figure stuff out while hunting down her original self and figuring out whether or not she wants to actually go through with it and kill her original self. I thought it was super interesting and entertaining. It's not going to leave a huge impression because it is very, very short. I think it would be so cool to have a full-length novel set in this world. I think it would be super interesting. But yeah, had a good time with it. The audio experience was very, very good. It was very well produced. Julia Whelan is a fantastic narrator. I've listened to stuff from her before, that she's narrated before. Absolutely fantastic. And it was just interesting. I can see the ending potentially not satisfying people, which is fine. And of course, it's not going to be as in-depth as a full-length novel, so, take that for what you will. But I thought it was super entertaining for what it was. The next thing I listened to was Unfed Yourself by Gary John Bishop. And this is, again, another super short. I was on a kick of really short audios at the time. And this is a super short self-help book. And he essentially just, it's kind of again, listened to it on audio, and it's about 3.5 hours on audio, and it's just a 3-hour motivational kick in the punch. And, is it earth-shattering? No. Is it stuff that you've heard before? And to some degree, deep down, just no. Yes. And essentially his argument is just that there are a lot of things that you can affect about your life. You can take control of a lot of things. There is some self-talk that you can shift. There's some perspectives that you can shift that can be really powerful, and ultimately you need to just do it. Basically, is what I think it comes down to. And I think it'll be interesting just to get a physical copy, mark some key things as just quick motivational stuff that every now and again you just need to remind yourself of, and go from there. So that is everything so far that I've read in the month of March. It is actually half a week left there's actually half a week left in the month of March. So if I finish anything else, I will make another clip. But I wanted to at least film this part while the lighting was good, and I had a moment to film during the afternoon, again when there was lighting. So if there's another clip to be had, I will put that here if I have finished anything else. But anyway, that's what I read in the month of March. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be sure to link all of the relevant videos down below, as well as my Twitter and Instagram. That's where I'd like to hang out. I will also link more information about how you can support the Black Lives Matter movement, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.